Don't miss the magnolias this year. It's the second week of April and the magnolia blossom is just gorgeous. I'm lucky having a tree just around the corner from us, and I was out the other day taking some photographs while I was on my daily dog walk. This is a little picture I did yesterday of some magnolias from that lovely tree down the road, and I want to have another go at it just because I enjoy doing it, and see if I can get the colours just a little bit darker and maybe a little bit more form in the leaves. I wasn't 100% happy with them, but I quite like the picture. I like the feel of it. You can see the colours I'm mixing here. I'm going to go with cobalt blue. I find ultramarine granulates quite a lot, and sometimes you don't really want that effect. You won't get it so much with cobalt, so I'm going to mix up some cobalt, quite a lot. Always mix up more than you think you're going to need, definitely. And also I've got here a tube green, sap green. I like sap green. I usually add something else to it, maybe a bit of the yellow which I've got here, which is cadmium yellow pale. So I've got some blue, I've got some green, and I've got some yellow. I'll probably mix a little bit more up before I start the painting. I forgot to mention as well, I'm using quite an exotic colour here, which is unusual for me. It's cobalt violet. You can only get it Winsor and Newton in the Artists series, and it's quite expensive. But it's a lovely colour and it goes a long way, so I would recommend you got it. Cobalt violet. So here's the drawing that I've got on watercolour paper. I initially did well, it looks really messy, doesn't it? But that doesn't matter. This is the drawing that I did to work out the little composition. I did it just on cartridge paper, lots of rubbing out, lots of scribbles, but I quite like this. So what I did then was I put this on my light box and put some watercolour paper over it and traced it so that I got this drawing, which is a nice clean drawing. If you rub out a lot on watercolour paper, it will disturb the surface and it will make your washes look a bit messy and not really quite right. If you haven't got a light box to do that, just hold it up against the window, or trace it onto tracing paper and then put it onto your watercolour paper. It's a good tip because then if you do mess up your painting, which we all do, you won't have to do the drawing again. You'll have it. You can put it back on your light box, you can trace it again, and you can have another go at the painting. You can try different colours. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wet the paper around the flower shapes, and then I'm going to drop in the colours that I've mixed, and then I should probably sprinkle a little bit of salt in here and there. I probably won't narrate this little bit, and I might fast forward some of it. So I've wet the paper quite a lot here off camera. If you find it difficult to keep the background wet, especially if you're just beginning watercolour, then what I suggest is you do a smaller picture than I've done. Just do one small flower and see how you get on. You can mask out the flowers, and in some cases that's the best way to do it. But with these bigger shapes, I don't really do that. If I was doing that sort of area, it would be nice to mask out, and then you could very quickly put the background on. This is making it a little bit more difficult because I've got to drop the colours around the shapes. Anyway, we'll have a go. You can see the paper is cockling. I should use stretch paper really, but if you got everything just right, you'd never do anything, would you? So it's been about 10 minutes now. It's drying quite nicely. I should really leave it a little bit longer, but I might just start. This was the blizzard I was talking about with the soil that I didn't really want to get. I would have preferred something a little bit more subtle like this. But you're never going to get two pictures the same, are you? No matter how hard you try. I've got a bit of a, well, I have got a stronger colour around the flowers, which is what I wanted. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to where the foliage is, where some of the leaves are. Maybe make a start there on this one. You could really start anywhere, but I quite fancy doing that. So we've got little buds, and I'm not sure what that is actually. I think it's a leaf. We'll make it a leaf anyway. There we go. And I know that these areas here, quite pale looking at my photographs, and then that goes quite pale, maybe a bit greener, and then it goes into the twig. So I'll just leave that for now, just to start, just to get a little bit of colour on there. As you can see, I've got a few pictures here that I took that I'm looking at as I'm working, yeah, in this particular case the leaves were very yellow, and we've got a few sort of warmer, maybe a bit of burnt sienna coming in parts here as well. So they're all good things to remember. And you see what I mean about the pink on these particular flowers. The pink's going to look quite nice on there. So what I'm doing here is putting a little bit of that burnt sienna in places, which will warm things up a little bit. And maybe I'll do the branch now. I'm not painting quite the same as I would if I wasn't talking and making the video, clearly, so you'll have to bear with me. I probably wouldn't be quite as careful. I'm not looking as if I'm careful, I know, but I probably wouldn't be as careful as this. I think what you've got to do is have a good understanding of the structure of your flower and the colours that were there when you took the photographs, when you did your sketches. And then really you've just got to go with your own creativity and choose colours and shapes that you really like and put them into your picture without worrying too much about getting things right. You need to get things right if you were doing a botanical drawing, or you were the sort of person who really likes to get every detail right, then that's fine. So what I'm doing here is just putting some greens, some darker greens in, showing some of the shadows on the leaves, or the darker part of the leaves on here. You could soften the edges, or you could leave them hard-edged. Quite like this burnt sienna, so I think I might sort of exaggerate that a little bit in places. Right, what I'm going to do now is mix up some colour for the shadows, and I'm going to use the cobalt blue, and I'm going to use the cobalt blue and the cobalt violet. So we've got some of the colours out. I'll have to mix some more as we go along, but it's making a start on getting some of your colours out. It's a bit like cooking, as I always say. You've got to be prepared, so you've got to get your colours out, even though it means mixing some more later on. Right, so I'm going to have a little bit of experiment first with some of this blue and see how it looks. I'd like to get some of the edges of the petals sort of curled inwards. I'm not sure if I'll succeed on that really. Looking at this one, I seem to get it here. Do you see what I mean? It's as if this petal is curled over. Sometimes things happen like that without a lot of planning, and you can find form quite easily if you put lights against darks in your paintings. So this is some of this cobalt violet going in. It's quite red, isn't it? I think I'm going to put a bit of blue in with that. and I'll carry on and try and get some shadows in these. What I don't want to do is lose the white, and that can be quite easily done. So what I'm going to do is put some darks against lights to keep the form of these petals, so that when I rub the pencil lines out, the petals are going to be separated by the form that I'm putting in, the difference in tone, and not by the pencil line, hopefully. So here I've got to decide what to do. It's light there, so I'm going to leave that light, and I think I'll put a little bit of shadow in here. See how that's going to look. This is fairly straightforward because it's going to be dark here, and then I'm going to wash it away with just tinted water up there, like that. See how that's looking. While the shadow areas are wet like this, you can play around with the paint. You can let things merge, you can sort of tease them into place like this. You can't do that when everything is dry. You can't be re-wetting and potching then, or you lose the transparency of the paint. So I'm just going to do something like that, which I think is looking all right. I can carry on, it doesn't matter, because I can always lift it out as well. Don't be too scared. If you keep things nice and wet, you can lift things out and put them back in again and potch around. Know how much you like potching around. We all like potching around a bit, but you mustn't overdo it. So maybe a little bit of shadow under there, but not too much. I don't want to lose this white. I'm keeping all soft edges here as well. I do tend to paint with soft edges, but I think hard edges coming in sometimes is a plus and can work really well. But for the time being, I think I'll just leave it like that. Put a little bit under there. So you can see potching around a bit there. And then you sort of stand back from it a little bit and have a look and see if you think, well, when those pencil lines are rubbed out, is this going to work? I would have thought so, I think so. I'll just strengthen that little area a bit, not too much. Now this here, I'm going to put a little bit of shadow on this, or a little bit of the pink colour that the petals have, but not too much. And I'm going to leave it pale there. You see, I've not got a light source that I can use as a reference on this particular painting. I'm making it up. If I had a light at one side of it, it'd be easier to see where to put the shadows, but I don't, so I've got to make them up, which is fine. I'd like it to be a bit darker there, I think. So I'll mix something up for just down there. See how that looks? Yep, I think I'll leave that. So I think I'll leave that. And then I've got these, I didn't know if this was a leaf or a bud. So I'm going to make it into a bud, and maybe we could have some sort of light source on here. Where shall I put the shadow? I'll put it there. Now I've noticed on this flower here that some of the colour has run in to the petals. And with a damp brush you can just lift that out so all is not lost, and it doesn't matter if it does run into the petals. It's not the end of the world, and it will add more interest to your picture. Remember, we're doing fast and loose again. Not so fast, but definitely loose. But we have got a pretty good drawing as a basis. I did look carefully at the structure of the flowers, and I'm happy with my drawing. I think it suits me for the sort of work that I want to do. It won't suit everybody. I'm not happy with that little bit there. I don't like that very hard line there, so I'm just take a bit of that out. Might be a mistake, but it can always be remedied a little bit more later. There we go. Yeah, I think that's better. I think it needs to be light. Could always put a bit of blue on it as well. Shall I make it a bit yellower? See, there are all these decisions you have to make as you're painting. This is not a sort of step-by-step I've worked out before, and I'm doing so that no mistakes are going to be made, or I know exactly what I'm doing. That is not the case this time. This is how I would normally paint, which is making it up as I go along. Sometimes it works better than others, but if you don't take chances and you don't take risks with your painting, you're never going to make any progress. Don't worry too much about things. That's okay now, I think. I need to separate these three now. So how shall I do that? Maybe there. So I cleaned off my brush, wiped it on my jeans, and there we go, maybe a touch more. Yeah. Wipe your brush, rinse your brush, and then wipe it on something. A bit of tissue or a cloth would be better than your jeans, but there we go. And then here, maybe I'll do it there. Although I think that should be kept quite light because it's got some of the colour in from the underneath wash. Right, and then something on here. And then I just feel, because we've got quite a bit of pink in here, maybe we could put a bit of pink in there. What I do is keep looking away from it, just moving a little bit further away from the picture, taking my glasses off, and then seeing what it looks like without my glasses on, because otherwise you're going to get too caught up in too much detail. What we're looking for are interesting shapes and interesting colours, and we're hoping to keep the essence and the character of the magnolia. That's the aim, without getting into anything too botanical and anything too precise. Just the thing is, work around it, keep doing a little bit, and then go back and see what you think. Let it dry maybe a little bit. Don't make it too samey, so have lights and darks going on. Some areas lighter than others, and some dark areas. And then, as I said, just look at it from a bit of a distance and see how you think it's going. I'm not happy with that bit there. I have to put a bit of thought into that. I think maybe I could make it a bit darker underneath. I'll have a look at some of my photographs and see what I can do with that bit. If you're having problems in any areas when you're doing your painting, don't labour them. Work somewhere else on your picture and then go back to them. That's my advice. A little bit more. I'm liking this burnt sienna on here, and also maybe a bit of. I'm just looking to see how these go. That maybe this is a little bud here, so maybe a bit of dark underneath it, and then it could probably have a little bit more yellow on it, I think. This is bothering me a touch. that there. But maybe it shouldn't bother me. Perhaps I'll leave it. It's bothering me slightly here, because I feel as if that should be separated from that with a bit of blue. Could be wrong. Then I've got to get the right blue, haven't I? So, I don't know. Maybe I'll do that. Leave it. Maybe I'll just do that. There we go. Right. This is... I'm tempted to go back and lift that out, but I'm going to leave it because it's looking quite nice actually. I think it's blurring here, giving me a soft edge, and maybe looking as if that flower is further back, which would be nice. So it's possibly a little happy accident, and that's what we've got to try and encourage when we're painting watercolour. Happy accidents. And then you've got to decide when you're going to stop. I'm going to stop on that now and have a look at it a little bit later. I might strengthen just a little bit on the twigs. So I mixed a very dark brown here. Be very careful when you're mixing dark browns. If you add too much blue, then you tend to get more of a black colour, which doesn't look nice in your paintings. Keep your darks on the warm side with your brown. That's a bit more blue going in there. I just feel I need a few more darks. At the end of the day, it's what you like, isn't it? It's your painting. So you put in what you like. Never mind about anybody else. I think I'll call that a day, and when it's totally dry I'm going to rub out the pencil lines and put a bit of splattering on with white gouache. So it looks as if it's dry now, so I'm going to rub the pencil lines out. This is a really nice rubber, by the way. It's a Derwent art eraser. I always used to use a putty rubber, but I don't like them very much now. This is lovely. It's very good for watercolour paper. See, so we're keeping the form, and what I mean by that is the petals are separated. You can see they're not separated by a pencil line, but they're separated by blocks of form and colour. I think this is looking quite nice. I always find the leaves the most difficult part actually, to get the form in them. Right, there we are. And I'm not going to tidy up any of the edges, I'm just going to leave it as it is. What I want to do now is put a little bit of splattering on it. It could work, it might not work, but you've got to take some chances. So here we've got some Winsor and Newton designer gouache, which is very opaque. The watercolour white that you get with sets is not very opaque at all and is no good for this sort of work. This is what you need. You can also use acrylic, but what I find with acrylic is that when you're splattering, sometimes the splatter doesn't go exactly where you want it to go, and you find it all the way down your jumper or on your tablecloth or somewhere, and you won't get acrylic out. If it happens with the watercolour, it's not a problem, it will wash out. So I do tend to like to use the gouache. It's water-based. It's very difficult to get the right consistency with it sometimes. It can be too watery or too thick, and I'm never quite sure what the best brush to buy is either. So just suck it and see, I suppose. I like to use a rigger sometimes. See if this is going to work. Yeah, there we go. That's working all right. You have to be a bit careful because sometimes you get lines instead of the blobs. Let's see. You don't want them to be too uniform, I don't think, on your picture. Just put them in have more in one area than another maybe. Think that's enough? Think that's enough? One more? Done. There we are. So quite often when I'm working, I will put a mount around a picture, sort of halfway, 3/4 the way through, to see how it's looking. I didn't really think it was necessary to do that. This is just so experimental, this picture, that I just sort of carried on. But if I put a mount around it now, we can see how it looks. Maybe I'll take it out of this bag. So this is a 12 by 10 mount. And you know, this part of the picture making process, this is to decide where you might put this mount on here. So that's that aperture, and then I've got a larger aperture as well, which is this aperture. You might think it works nice like that with more space around it. So when you've done your picture, that's for you to decide. This is the reason that I wet the whole picture. When I was doing this, I wet the whole paper and let it bleed and soften out, and then you've got the option of using more than just this little area, which can be quite nice. I'm quite pleased with that. I shall do some more. I think what I'm going to do next is do this flower bigger and do it a little bit more experimentally. We can use some cling film. So I might have a go at that later on. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I was rambling a little bit, but I hope you gleaned something useful from it. And I hope you realise that painting is an experimental process, and you've got to take a few chances, and you've got to work around your picture and be a little bit patient sometimes in letting things dry.